Welcome to First Sleep Aid, calm stories to help you unwind, learn, and fall asleep. From true crime to curious facts and thoughtful ideas, always softly spoken. Subscribe now and take a deep breath. You're in good hands. All right, so today we are diving headfirst into one of Belgium's most, well, I'd say haunting mysteries, the Brabant Killers.
Yeah, a truly dark period for Belgium.
Absolutely. Between 1982 and 1985, this unidentified gang, they just unleashed this wave of violence. It's shocking, and it left the entire nation grappling with, well, trauma, really, and so many questions that are still unanswered even today.
Yeah, it's the kind of case that really sticks with you. I mean, the level of brutality, it's hard to even process.
Right.
Over just a few years, you have 28 people dead and 22 more injured. And it's not just the numbers, it's the seemingly random nature of it all. The lack of a clear motive, that's what makes it so fascinating and so disturbing even now.
It's a case that defies easy answers. 28 lives lost, 22 others wounded, and we still don't know for sure who's behind it all. At the center of this, we have this core group, right? And they're only known by these chilling nicknames, almost like something out of a crime novel. The Giant, the Killer, and the Old Man. And despite decades of investigation, not a single living person has been convicted. The official investigation, they closed it in June 2024.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because they actually picked it back up in 2025 due to some new information coming to light. So clearly, the need for closure is still very much alive.
Absolutely. It shows you just how deeply this case has impacted people. And in this deep dive, what we're going to try to do is, well, carefully examine the facts as we know them. We'll go through the timeline, these horrific events, how they unfolded.
Right.
We'll look at the methods they used, these perpetrators, and delve into the various theories that have come up. Because, well, in the absence of conclusive answers, people try to make sense of it, right?
Years.
And it's crucial, as we go through all of this, that we stay respectful. Respectful to the victims, to their families. This was a deeply troubling time, and there are still so many uncertainties.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, part of what makes this case so compelling. So let's start with the basics, the chronology, the timeline of the attacks. Because even before the main spree began, there's this significant event in December 1981, a burglary at a gendarmerie barracks.
Utterbeek.
That's right, in Etterbeek. They stole weapons and ammunition. And here's the thing, some of that stolen stuff, it was later allegedly linked to a name we'll discuss later, Madani Bouchut. He becomes a person of interest later on.
Yeah, that 1981 theft it's almost like a dark foreshadowing. Right? It might have provided the means for the violence that followed.
Yeah.
Then in 82, the attacks start.
They begin in earnest.
March, they steal a shotgun in Denain. May, there are 2 car thefts, and there's this fascinating detail about one of the car thefts. The killer, he was actually seen without a mask, and witnesses said he spoke French, educated French, like it was his native language. It's a small detail, but gives you this little glimpse, right?
Took a clue.
Into who these people might have been. Maybe a bit more sophisticated than you'd initially think, given the brutality.
And that is the thing that's so perplexing. Then in August 1982, the violence crosses borders right into France. Armed robbery in Maubeuge, 2 French police officers get wounded. But then September 1982, that's when things really escalate. A weapons dealer in Wavre is robbed, a police officer is killed, and 2 others are seriously injured. They steal 15 firearms, including submachine guns. Talk about firepower.
Yeah, the Wavre attack, that was a clear turning point, I think. It showed they were willing to directly confront and even kill law enforcement.
Yay.
And getting those submachine guns, that changed everything. They had serious firepower now. And then to end the year, we have December 1982, the armed robbery of a restaurant, this time in Beersel. And this is where the senseless violence really starts to stand out.
The brutality for such small gains.
Right. The caretaker is tortured and murdered. For what? They steal coffee and wine. It doesn't make sense on the surface.
It's chilling, isn't it? That disconnect, the violence so extreme and the gains so insignificant. It makes you wonder what the real motivation was.
Exactly. If it wasn't just about money, then what was it?
Exactly. And this pattern, it continues into 1983. January, a taxi driver in Brussels is robbed and murdered. February, more armed robberies, this time supermarkets, in Rixensart and Uccle. Now, thankfully, no lives were lost in those 2, but several people were wounded in the Rixensart one. But there's a weird detail here. An Audi that was stolen after the Rixensart robbery, it had bullet holes from the shootout, right?
Yeah.
It's later recovered and then, get this, stolen again.
Wow.
Why would they steal the same damaged car twice?
It is strange, right? It makes you wonder what they were really after. Was it the car itself or something in the car? Or maybe it was just, a way to taunt the police.
It's a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit. And then, in March 1983, another supermarket robbery turns deadly. This one's in Halle. A staff member is killed. May, another supermarket robbery, this time Goonies. No fatalities this time. But then comes September 1983, a particularly brutal month.
It was. First, you have the robbery and murder at a textile factory in Temse. One worker killed, his wife injured, and they steal 7 bulletproof jackets. They were clearly thinking about protecting themselves, which makes you think maybe they were planning something bigger or maybe bringing more people.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And then, just a week later, the attack on the gas station in Nivelles, a couple is murdered during a burglary. 2 gendarmes respond to the scene and they're shot at. One is killed, the other seriously injured. And what do they steal? Tea, coffee, cooking oil.
It's that same bizarre pattern again. Extreme violence for almost nothing.
Exactly. And they escape in a stolen Saab. But here's the thing. Evidence from this Saab, it later, quote-unquote, disappears from police custody.
Yeah, that's one of the many things that has fueled all the conspiracy theories around this case. I mean, how does evidence just vanish like that?
Right.
Was it incompetence? Was it something more deliberate? It really erodes trust in the official investigation.
Absolutely. And then, October 1983, more bloodshed. An armed robbery at a restaurant in Ohain. The owner is killed. Nothing is stolen. Another supermarket robbery, this time Beersel, a customer, is killed. December 1983, a shop in Anderlews is robbed. The couple who owned it, they're murdered. This time, they do steal something, jewelry, and they destroy the surveillance footage. But what's really interesting here is the getaway car.
A Volkswagen.
A stolen Volkswagen. And not just any Volkswagen. This one had fake plates that linked back to a location they'd used before. And they used Volkswagens a lot, often modified. It shows a real level of planning, but also, I don't know, maybe a sense of arrogance?
Like they thought they could get away with anything.
Exactly. And then there's this big gap. They go quiet for almost 2 years.
That silence it's almost as unsettling as the violence itself. What were they doing during that time? Did they disband? Were they caught for something else? It's one of the big mysteries of the case.
And then they come back with a vengeance in September 1985. 2 attacks, back-to-back, Delhaize supermarkets, Braine-l'Alleud, and Overace. 8 people killed. It's like the violence escalated even further.
It did, and it became even more senseless. This time, they were killing people before even entering the supermarkets. It wasn't just about the robbery anymore.
Right, like the robbery was almost secondary.
Exactly. And then the final attack, the one that really seared itself into everyone's memory, November 9th, 1985, the Delhaize supermarket in Aalst. 8 more people dead, several others seriously injured. The brutality was just, well, it was horrific. They killed a family in the parking lot for seemingly no reason.
The Aalst massacre. It's the one everyone remembers, sadly.
It was just so shocking, the level of, well, cruelty. They were wearing disguises. Some witnesses said they were laughing, taunting people. It was like they enjoyed the violence. And then there's the issue of the police response, or lack thereof. Reports of delays, even inaction from nearby units. That's fueled all sorts of theories about official complicity.
Yeah, those theories have been swirling around this case for decades. And they're hard to ignore, especially given what happened in Ulster. So we have to talk about the methods. The Brabant Killers' MO. The thing that jumps out at you right away is the disconnect, the huge disconnect between the violence and the reward.
Absolutely. They were incredibly violent, but they weren't getting rich off of this.
Right. It wasn't your typical, bank heist kind of thing.
No, not at all. And that shift in '85, where they started killing people before even going into the supermarkets, that's telling. It suggests a change in motivation, or maybe it reveals a deeper, darker purpose.
Yeah, that's a chilling thought.
And their knowledge of firearms, how they use them, some people have said it resembled police tactics. And then there's the ammunition they used, this rare buckshot. It was similar to what Group Diane used.
Group Diane being an elite unit of the Belgian gendarmerie.
Right. So, of course, people started wondering if there was a connection there.
And then the getaway cars. Always Volkswagens, often modified. They would remove trim, repaint them, clearly trying to stay anonymous. But they always seemed to stick with Volkswagens. Why?
Good question. And then you have this other strange thing. They would plan these meticulous escape routes, but then they'd often stick around at the crime scene, even when the police arrived. It's like they were almost daring the police to catch them.
Yeah, it's a real sense of arrogance almost, or maybe it was a feeling of invincibility.
Right. Like they truly believed they were untouchable.
Yeah.
And then they all strayed. The belief is they had at least one helper, which suggests there might have been a whole network supporting them.
And then there's the discovery of the weapons cache in the canal in 1986. But the Winchester shotguns, the ones used in the massacres, they weren't there. And there's been controversy about this cache.
Oh, yeah. Big time. The timing of the discovery. Some people think those items were planted there after the fact. And that led to retired detectives being questioned in 2019 for potential evidence tampering. So it's not just the crime themselves, it's all the questions surrounding the investigation and how it was handled.
It adds another layer of mystery, and it makes it so much harder to separate fact from fiction. So we've talked about the facts, the timeline, the methods. Now let's dive into the murkier waters.
The theories.
The theories, right. Because when you have a case like this, so many unanswered questions, the void is filled with speculation. And one of the biggest, most enduring theories is official complicity.
Right. The idea that someone within the Belgian government, maybe the military or the gendarmerie, was somehow involved.
And there are some things that fuel those suspicions, like the perceived lack of a strong police response in Alost, the disappearing evidence. And let's be honest, the Belgian gendarmerie was eventually abolished, and that decision, at least in part, was due to the lack of public confidence in their handling of this case.
Yeah, it's hard to ignore that. But then there's also the theory about Operation Gladio.
Right. This was a NATO stay-behind network, a secret network set up during the Cold War. Some people believe the Brabant Killers were connected to this network, maybe carrying out some sort of, destabilizing operation.
A very shadowy theory. But it's worth noting that an official parliamentary inquiry actually looked into that. They found no evidence to support a link between Gladio and any acts of terrorism or the infiltration of criminal groups in Belgium.
So, while it makes for a good story, it's probably not the answer. But then there's the connection to the far-right group Westland New Post, or WNP. And this one has some more concrete evidence behind it.
It does. Former members of WNP, they've admitted to surveilling some of the supermarkets that were later targeted.
So they were at least aware of these places and potentially casing them.
Exactly. And WNP, they had a history of violence, internal conflicts, and they were linked to stolen NATO documents and even the murders of Jewish community leaders. And it's interesting, the lull in the Brabant Killers' activities between 83 and 85, it coincides with the downfall of WNP. Their leader, Paul Latinas, commits suicide, and the group basically falls apart.
So the theory goes that maybe the disruption of WNP also disrupted the Brabant Killers?
Yeah, it's a compelling idea.
Yeah.
And then you have the 2014 accusation. A former WMP member comes out and says the leaders were behind the Brabant killings. That led to Michel Luber, a prominent figure in the WNP, being questioned. He was eventually released without charge, but it shows how the investigation kept coming back to WMP.
Right, WNP was clearly on the radar. So we have these big overarching theories, but there were also individual suspects.
Oh.
And two names come up again and again, Patrick Hamers and Madani Buhush.
Right. Patrick Hamers, notorious criminal, involved in bank robberies, kidnappings. Some people thought he might be the giant because of his height, but his MO was all wrong. He was all about big scores, taking hostages. The Brabant Killers, they were different.
Yeah, too chaotic, too brutal for Hamers. But then you have Madani Buhush, former gendarme, a history of dealing in stolen weapons, even using similar explosives to the Brabant Killers.
And don't forget, some of the weapons stolen in that 1981 gendarmerie barracks burglary, they were allegedly found in his possession.
Right, so he's definitely a person of interest, but despite all the investigations, there's never been that smoking gun, that one piece of evidence that definitively links him to the Brabant killing.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that the investigation wasn't perfect. There were missteps, even injustices, like the case of the Borains.
Right, an entire group of innocent men wrongly accused and detained.
It really highlights how much pressure the investigators were under.
Yeah.
They were desperate for a break in the case, and in their rush to get results, they made mistakes.
And those mistakes had real consequences for these innocent men. And then there were all the tips from the public, so many of them, it was almost overwhelming. Some were genuine, but many were just based on rumors, personal vendettas, or just plain misinformation.
It was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. And with all the rivalries between the different police agencies, evidence wasn't always handled properly. There were issues with the chain of custody. Fingerprints weren't always collected or analyzed correctly. It's a mess.
It was a very messy investigation, and sadly, a lot of that early chaos made it much harder to get to the truth. But even with all the setbacks, the case has never really gone cold. There have been new leads even recently.
Right, like Christian Bonkowski.
Yeah, the former Group Diane member who, on his deathbed, claimed to be the giant. It was a bombshell, but unfortunately, the DNA and fingerprints didn't match.
A huge disappointment.
It was. And then in 2020, they re-released that photo, the one from 1986, of the man holding the Stuckey S12 shotgun. They also put out an appeal for information about a man with a wine-stained birthmark who was seen at the Beersel supermarket.
But still, nothing concrete came out of it. It felt like time was running out, especially with the statute of limitations looming.
Right, and then just when everyone thought the case was closed for good, January 2025 rolls around, and boom, a new lead, and they reopen the investigation.
It's incredible, isn't it? After all this time, there might still be a chance to get answers.
It shows just how much this case still resonates with people, how much they want to see justice done. And the Brabant Killers, they haven't just been relegated to the history books, they've also made their way into popular culture. We've had films, TV shows, even novels, all inspired by this case.
Right, like the 2018 film Don't Shoot. It focused on the Alstus attack and the victims' families. Really powerful stuff. And then you have 1985, the TV series from 2023. It took a more fictionalized approach, but it really captured the mood of the time, the fear, the uncertainty.
And it showed how the case, well, it basically ripped apart the fabric of Belgian society. And then you have something like Grievous Reminiscence, the novel from 2024. It's a more philosophical take, comparing the Brabant Killers to other infamous criminals throughout history.
It's fascinating how a case like this can inspire so many different interpretations across so many different mediums.
It speaks to the power of this story and how it continues to grip our collective imagination. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's clear that the Brabant Killers case, it's more than just a cold case.
It's a national trauma,
It is a wound that hasn't healed.
and maybe it never fully will.
Maybe not. And those big questions, the why, the who, they continue to haunt us. Was it terrorism? Was it corruption? Was it something else entirely?
It's hard to let go of those questions.
It is. But the fact that there's a new lead, it gives us a sliver of hope. Maybe after all these years, we'll finally get some answers, some closure.
That's what we all hope for.
We do. And for the listeners, for those of you who've joined us on this deep dive, I think the Brabant Killers case, it forces us to think about justice, about how societies deal with trauma, how they remember, and how they move on. It's a complex case with no easy answers, but that's what makes it so important to keep talking about it, keep searching for the truth, and maybe, just maybe, with time and with a bit of luck,
Yes.
we'll finally get there.
Hopefully.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.